Hi everyone, welcome back to History Herstory. Today I'm going to be doing a video all about my dissertation. It's done! Okay, I actually cannot believe I'm holding my finished dissertation. When I started this project, I genuinely didn't think I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I just wanted to get to the point where I could just hold it and be like, this is mine, this is a piece of work that I've literally put my all into, and something that I felt was really important as well. But yeah, so today's video, all I'm going to be going through is kind of the steps I took in doing this dissertation, and trying to work out basically how to go about it. I really struggled, especially in the early stages, working out kind of like the best ways to write a history dissertation. I didn't feel like I had loads of support. I kind of like a really structured plan and I didn't really have that. So I thought like a video all about that sort of thing might be really useful for people who are gonna enter their third year this year and start writing their own thing. It's so crazy, it's so scary, but you know, when you put your all into it, it's actually really rewarding as well. So don't be too put off. It's so much fun when you actually pick a topic you really like. But yeah, so let's get into it. Okay, so for me, the first thing that you kind of have to sort of like get on with the diss and kind of narrow down is your topic, and more specifically your question. So my question for my diss, or at least my title, was A Perfect Slave, How Victorian Working Class Women Slavery Taught Them to Vote. So the title is a play on, well, kind of suffrage campaigns, which it draws on in the end of the research, but it's also in relation to, it's like a direct quote from an autobiography that I read. So we've got a woman called Mrs. Layton, and she discusses her mother being a perfect slave, and I kind of want to draw on that in the title. I wanted to kind of make it, you know, a little bit dramatic, and have a bit of a wow factor. But in terms of actually how I came up with that idea, it's a bit of a weird one. In second year, I did an essay all about the Industrial Revolution and kind of working class women, and their roles as mothers and as workers, and kind of like the interlink between those two roles and how that impacted them. In the essay, I looked loads at kind of like trade unions, and the role in trade unions in female suffrage later on in the period. And one of the things that I noticed was actually that trade unions get a lot of the kind of credit for getting working class women into the suffrage movement, but really trade unions were only for women who were in factories, and later on in my studies it became very clear that actually, although we like to think about women in the factories being, you know, so central to Victorian Britain and the Industrial Revolution, the reality is not the case. So many women were working as domestic service, and they just were not included whatsoever in any of these studies. And I felt like there really needs to be kind of a more broad approach to understanding why women wanted the right to vote, and why they were willing to put so much at risk to gain that right. And that was something that I felt like there was a gap in the research for, and that's something that's so crucial when you're trying to pick out a question or pick out a topic, is that actually you're finding a gap in an area where we don't know enough, or there's weaknesses, and something that you can really build upon, to try and make it, you know, like your research quite original. So that's something that I kind of wanted to draw on as well. The other thing is doing loads of reading. The more reading you do, the more clear it'll become, kind of where the gaps are in the literature. One of the books that I really focused on was Emma Griffin's The Breadwinner, and that kind of helped me pick out sort of like the types of women that I wanted to focus on and that sort of thing as well. So once you've got your question kind of set up, the next thing you need to do is think about your methodology. So for me, I really wanted to try and actually kind of mimic what Emma Griffin did in Breadwinner, and actually take it back to basics and look at the women who were the women's own words and their own stories and their own narratives. I didn't want to look at masculinist sources. I wanted to actually take it back down to the bare bones of what did these women say happened to them. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. So what I did was look at autobiographies. The difficult side of that was actually that there's not that many, so there's not much to pick from, and that did make it really difficult. It meant I couldn't really use kind of quite a lot of sources, so it did mean that actually the sources I picked I had to use really closely. So naturally the best methodology for me to pick would be microhistory, and taking a few sources and just really intensive study of them. In doing that, I did also want to draw on kind of like the feminist history as well, and so what I did was I wanted to combine feminist history methodology and microhistory methodology. So this is like my massive dissertation board. This board was literally the centre of my life for like weeks. It's absolutely insane. In this corner I've got a little bit about my methodology. One of the things that I think is really important is that you work out a way to organise yourself that works for you. For me, I like to just see all my ideas out in the open, so that's kind of why I went for the whole board thing. I do feel like I maybe look a little bit crazy with my big board, but you know, it really worked for me, and it really helped me actually put all my ideas into a concise plan rather than just loads and loads of piles of paper. It just didn't work for me. I know a lot of people it did work for. A lot of people had all theirs online and all organised, but for me I just couldn't visualise my overarching argument without having it physically there. But yeah, so you can see here kind of like drawing on some quotes from some different articles relating to different types of history, picking out my key historians as well, who I felt kind of inspired by and wanted to draw upon and build upon, was really crucial. A lot of this was all dealt with in the introduction of my work, and it kind of set maybe like the foundations for what I was doing and why I was doing it and that sort of thing. From that point then, we had to do looking at like the actual sources we're going to pick out. I really struggled with this at the start because, to be honest, I just didn't know where to look. When I was writing and planning all of this, it was literally in the height of lockdown. I was messaging archives left, right and centre. Everyone was basically just saying, no, we don't have online copies, you can't come in person. It was an absolute nightmare, and to be honest, like, it's still not perfect, but we move. So what I did basically was have a look at some sources that were easier to get hold of. Because I do history and politics as a joint honours, basically my dissertation was only 7,000 words inclusive of footnotes. So I didn't really have that much to play with. So when I started planning the dissertation, I literally wanted to take like 4 or 5 autobiographies or autobiographies or diaries, and kind of like really intensively study them and kind of pick out the key points from that. It became very apparent when I started to plan this out that I did not have the words for that, and I'm hoping this is something I can do kind of later on down the line, but I didn't have the words for that, so I literally was only able to pick 2. In the end, that was probably a good thing with the whole COVID situation, because it was just so difficult to get the amount of sources I needed and wanted when all the archives were just closed. It was an absolute nightmare. So yeah, so I picked 2 sources. One was a factory worker, because obviously, although, you know, every single one wasn't a factory worker, factory women were still so important, and it just wouldn't be right to just cut them out of the narrative completely. So we've got a factory worker at the top here, and then at the bottom I've got a domestic service worker, and each little kind of tab is a section from their autobiography, kind of about their life and something that happened. And basically I read through their autobiographies, then I picked out the key sections and wrote them all down, and then I organised them into bigger sections. For example, this one is education, this one is factory life, this one in the corner is about their childhood, and I broke them all down into little groups basically, and separated the autobiography out into themes. It was a lot of work, but it made understanding how you could compare these 2 women a lot easier. So it was definitely worth all the work. So I did all of that, but I wasn't done, because obviously with history, and as you all probably know, you've really got to analyse these sources and kind of, you know, work out what they mean and what they're telling you. So that is what every little post-it note is on this board. So each one of these goes through kind of the relevance of that point, how it had an impact later on, and ultimately all of these kind of came together to form an argument that would then flow throughout the whole dissertation. And that argument kind of comes along here in kind of like the similarities between the women, and kind of the key themes in the corner. But yeah, so that's all kind of like the sources. If I was going to give top tips, my first one would be start early. No reading is too much reading, so literally just go for it. Like, just read, like skim read everything, any books that are like, you know, exactly perfect for what you want to study, like dig into them, like proper give them a good read, because I do think like reading as well helps you develop more your own writing style. So it's definitely worth having a go doing that. I'd also say don't be afraid to go to tutors' office hours. Like, I'm pretty sure I was annoying my tutor so much by the end of writing my dissertation, because I was literally there like almost every week asking questions, talking through my ideas. Talking through your ideas with people is just so useful. I think sometimes as well it actually makes me start to question what I thought I knew. So I really do recommend doing that as well. And I think out of all of it, the most important thing for me was that I felt like my research was important. Not so much in like the cocky way of like, oh well, my research is important, but in the way that I felt like, you know, a lot of women, they committed so much to the female suffrage movement, and they never got remembered really. You know, they wrote these autobiographies, no one reads them, and their narratives don't get included in our common history, and I just don't think that's okay. So that was kind of like the main thing really for me, that was kind of like pushing me to continue with this dissertation and actually, you know, make it something worthwhile, because I just felt like these women had given up so much for us today that they deserve to be remembered. And I just really felt like a connection with these women. Some of the stories that I read were just absolutely horrible, and I just kind of wanted to give them the credit that they deserved, and make sure that they didn't go forgotten. I think really that's what history is all about in the end anyway. And that was kind of just, yeah, like the most central thing to me was, you know, proving that and giving that to it. Okay, so that's the end of the video. If you have any questions, please do not be afraid to contact me. Either drop it in the comments, or, you know, find me on Instagram at history.herstory, and ask me there. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. I'm going to try and get a blog post sorted and kind of put some of these ideas in writing, and kind of share some links to some of the pages that I found really useful in finding sources and dealing with kind of, yeah, online archives, because they are not nice. So I'll link all of that once I've got it. And yeah, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe. I'm hoping to get some more videos out in the next few weeks, and it should be really exciting. So yeah, have a great day, guys.